that this is possible, that the study of language, the study of grammatical language can be of a different type. Modern stylistics is a part of modern linguistics. So it has deviated partly from the ancient practice of studying grammar or studying the style. But in ancient schools of grammar or rhetoric, we have an excellent study of the different styles of language. So modern linguistics has incorporated such studies of language that we call traditional rhetoric or prosody. So it is all inclusive. The main areas that deviate modern linguistics from the traditional study of grammar or language is, number one, the priority of speech over writing. Okay, speech is primary and writing is regarded as secondary in case of modern linguistics. While in the traditional grammar, more focus was given on writing skill. Okay, speaking became secondary. But in modern linguistics, speech is primary and writing secondary. So any kind of discourse, any kind of linguistic composition or style depends on speech, on the priority of speech. Modern linguistics has therefore separate branches of studies. So we know that modern linguistics has, say, social linguistics, psycholinguistics. These are different branches of study. So one such branch is called stylistics. In stylistics, we have a combination of all the other branches or sub branches of linguistics, such as phonology. Phonology is a study of the basic unit of sound, that means the phonemes. So it has phonology and phonetics combined together, and the study of phonetics and phonology both are involved in the study of stylistics. The second area is morphology. Morphology is a part of the traditional study of the words. It was previously called philology or lexicology. Nowadays, we call it morphology because words contain morphs, either free morphs or bound morphs. And a combination of free and bound morphs, they contribute to the formation of words. Structural morphology talks about the creation of words, the usage of words, and the significance of words in the context of literature. So style in language also depends on morphology. Similarly, we have the use of grammar. Traditional grammarians, they thought about a system of grammar that was more or less prescribed or prescriptive in nature. In modern linguistics, we have a kind of grammar that is not prescriptive, rather that is descriptive. Modern linguistics regards any kind of articulation that is meaningful, that is capable of communicating the thought, to be grammatical, to be correct. So this is the basic difference. While the traditional grammar always talked about rules, prescribing certain rules of grammar. So any user has to use the rules of grammar in order to use the language. But modern linguistics saw that even a small child who has no learning about the grammar or the structure can use the language, the same language, for communicative purpose. Just with a vocabulary of 20 or 40 or 100, 400 words, a child can easily communicate. Therefore, without the knowledge of grammar, a person can communicate. So modern linguistics talks about the description of language. So this type of study that talks about the description of language with reference to grammar is a part of syntactology or syntax. So this is also an ingredient of stylistics. We also have, apart from these, different types of analysis or analytic mode that are all involved in the study of the style in English language. Therefore, stylistics has different branches. I just repeat what are the branches. Number one, the image of the text. Okay, the structure of the text that is visible in the written form or the type form. When you analyze that, the graphics of the image, of sound, of content. Say a poem is written form. When you see a poem, you can easily distinguish that particular poem from a prose work. So what is the distinctive mark of a poem? That just by seeing it, not even before reading it, okay, just by seeing the image of a poem, you can easily identify that this is a poem. What is the mark? That means the poetry has a particular graphics, and that graphic image of a poem is different from the graphic image of a prose. So the study of this graphic image of any kind of linguistic expression in its printed form or in its written form is a part of graphology, graphological analysis. So stylistics is a study of styles that are there in language with reference to different branches, different parts, components. And such studies are called graphological study, phonological study, morphological study, syntactical study, semantic study. Okay, semantic means meaning. It is related to meaning formation. So a word is a word is a word, but word also has meaning. So this meaning can be further multiplied within the context and outside the context with reference to something else. The signified relationship can be expanded and new signification can come out from the word. Symbolic signification can come out from the word. So a study of that, the meaning formation of words or language, is called semantics. So we are going to apply all these for the study. Apart from that, there is also semiotics, the study of sign language, the study of signs of signs. The science of sign language is called semiotics. So once we go for the analysis of stylistics, so we have semiotics as a component part. We also have got a discourse analysis. Say I'm speaking a kind of language here. The way I'm saying, I have used a particular style of this discourse. An analysis of this discourse where I am the addresser and you are the listener's addressee. So this addressor-addressee relationship, how this language is being used in the context, the narrative mode that is being used, the discourse mode, discursive mode that is used, falls under the category of pragmatics. Pragmatics. So these are basically the branches that are there in stylistics. Before coming to that, I shall be referring to the main text that I will be using in the class. I shall be using mainly A Linguistic Guide to the Study of Poetry by Geoffrey Leach. I repeat, A Linguistic Guide to the Study of English Poetry by Geoffrey Leach for the study of stylistics. So although this book is primarily focused on the study of poetry, we can use the analytical method used by Geoffrey Leach and apply that to the study of prose. So stylistics, in short, is a branch of modern linguistics that deals with the analysis of style. So in our UG course, we have already completed, we have already learned what is rhetoric, what is prosody. So if I have to define rhetoric, rhetoric refers to figurative use of language. That means the language has its literal meaning, grammatical meaning, and also a figurative meaning. Analysis of that figurative meaning, that actually makes no sense because most of these figures of speech are based on abstract ideas that are joined together by violence. So camel becomes a ship. So just think camel, how can camel become a ship? You say camel is a ship of desert, and then you find this camel not in the sea but in a desert, a ship in the desert. So it almost appears to be meaningless. So these are figurative devices where A is compared to B, here A is associated to B. So these figures of speech based on comparison, based on association, based on indirectness, all these are there in the traditional rhetoric study. So we have so many figures of speech that we commonly use. Do you remember some of these figures of speech? Just recall. You have all read these figures of speech. So by
Yes, sir.
yes, figures of speech.
Metaphor, like metaphor, synecdoche. No,
Hyperbole,
synecdoche, no.
oxymoron,
Hyperbole.
Oxymoron,
Simile,
irony,
personification.
imagery,
paradox.
irony, exactly, paradox,
So
imagery.
modern, yeah, thank you. Modern stylistics will involve all these figurative devices that are used. So it is a study that has advanced, tried to become more scientific, but it has all used the traditional rhetorical devices that are used in literature. So these are figures of speech based on comparison, figures of speech based on association, figures of speech based on contrast, figures of speech based on indirectness, figures of speech that are based on sound. Okay, can you remember any, can you refer to any figure of speech based on sound? Yes, you know.
Sir,
Just
alliteration.
Onomatopoeia.
Alliteration.
yeah, alliteration, onomatopoeia. So these are all figurative
Yes, sir.
devices. Do you think that these are natural or artificial? So onomatopoeia refers to the production of the natural sound. Onomatopoeia, likeness with the natural sound. Onomatopoeia. So the buzzing of the bees, the whispering, the rustling of the leaves. Okay, the sounds that are meaningful, capable of producing the sound effect, contributing to the meaning. This is called onomatopoeia. Similarly, alliteration. So we have so many examples. Full fathom, five, thy father lies. It's excellent to our ears. So in The Tempest, Ferdinand is there walking on the lonely beach. Ariel descends and sings a song. Full fathom five, thy father lies, of his bones a coral made. The full fathom five, thy father lies. So we have the alliteration of this sound. You are excellent singers, all of you.
F.
Yeah, it's a labio-dental sound. So lower lip is touching the upper teeth, and the sound, very soft sound, soothing sound is produced. So an artist who is capable of producing this sound. So Ferdinand is gradually being led into this magical world of Prospero, and Ariel is guiding Ferdinand through this musical composition. Philomel in melody, sing a lullaby, la 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 bee, la 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 bee. Shakespearean composition, Midsummer Night's Dream. So there is Titania who is being lulled to sleep by Philomel singing the song. It's excellent composition. So we have figures of speech based on sound composition, alliteration, assonance, consonance, onomatopoeia, even pun. Pun. You remember Twelfth Night? You have read Twelfth Night. So will you go to hunt, my lord? Yeah, Valentine. So the person, the page is asking Orsino in the opening scene of Twelfth Night, will you go to hunt, my lord? What? He's asking what? He says, the heart. Why should I go to hunt a heart, the most beautiful heart I possess? Orsino is giving this reply. When my eyes saw Olivia first, at that moment I was stunned. So my heart, see the sound heart, H-E-A-R-T, the pronunciation is, yes, pronunciation is heart. H-A-R-T, the pronunciation is heart. Same sound, two words, different words. The first is the human heart. The second is the deer. So the deer is there. So with the same word sound, two meanings are conveyed. Pun. Shakespeare was a master of pun. So stylistics talk about the analysis of figures of speech. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. I say there is step-by-step analysis of the text. And these different type of steps take into account the smallest unit of language and gradually move to the largest unit of language. So from the smallest unit, that is phoneme, the minimal, indivisible, distinctive unit of sound is called phoneme. From the analysis of phoneme, it gradually moves to the analysis of discourse, narrative. So this is called stylistics. So large umbrella, stylistics is a large umbrella that includes all these forms of analysis. Do you think that this analysis was something that was discovered in 20th century, or do we have a tradition of stylistics? What do you think? Is it new or something that you know has come from past?
No idea.
Yeah, you have idea. You have already done stylistic analysis. I said figures of speech you have done. Okay.
Rhetoric is a part of stylistic.
Yeah, rhetoric is a part of stylistics. Just the terminology will be different. Terminology will be different. In case of rhetoric, we have figures of speech based on comparison, association, contrast, indirectness, like this. In case of stylistics, we will classify that into schemes and tropes. Twofold classification we will make. One figure of speech based on content, one figure of speech based on form. So you must be having some idea about form and content. Form and content. So on the screen you can see me. So you can see a form. So you can hear what I am saying. So the way I am saying, the words I am using, they also contain something, content. So you can differentiate between form and content. Say a tree. Okay, Ferdinand de Saussure is saying that a tree is a tree is a tree. But there is no relationship between the image of a tree and the phonemes that are arranged to produce the sound tree. Similarly, the word tree, alphabetic word tree, does not resemble orthographic word TREE, does not resemble the actual tree. But in these cases, we have a form, the visible form, as well as the content. Okay, it's a vehicle that contains something. Say a cup of tea. You are aware of the cup of tea. If I ask you to describe a cup of tea, what portion will you describe? Yeah, will you describe the taste of the tea only? Or will you describe the cup also while describing the tea? So if you pour
Cup
the
also.
same cup also, yes, cup also. So if you pour that same tea in a glass, will it become a cup of tea? It will become a glass of tea. The tea will remain the same. But if you use cup, you can call it cup of tea. So this is not my cup of tea. If I use this expression that this is not my cup of tea, so what are you conceiving? A figurative language?
Yes, sir.
So A is compared to B. This B is a cup of tea. This cup of tea is an idea, but this cup of tea is also a form. So when you start analyzing a text, do you focus on form or content? When you analyze
Content.
Okay, when you make a critical appreciation, you focus primarily on content, not on form. You don't look at form. So you first you must
No,
have
we
an
look
idea.
at form.
You look at form also. Say a person, if you are looking at a person, do you look at form as well as content, or do you separate these, form and content? You remember Viola, when she meets the captain in the opening scene, Act 1, Scene 2. Viola says that usually people who look good, they are sometimes bad, and people who look bad, they are sometimes good. And she says that the captain In your case, you are both good from inside as well as outside. So goodness is there visible in your face. So both the form and content, both are same. Similarly, do you see, look at literature when you are analyzing a text, do you separate the form from content, or do you take both these together, the form and the content?
Both together.
Both together.
Both together, sir.
So how will you take this? Say if I ask you to describe this bottle, so will you describe this bottle? Yeah. How will you describe this bottle? With reference to the color, with reference to the shape, composition, the structure, or with reference to the content that is there inside? How will you describe this?
So structure.
Only the structure. You will focus only on structure. So this is a debate. Okay, this debate will be introduced in case of stylistics. So once you give more emphasis on the form, you become a formalist. Okay, you become a formalist. So you belong to a school of criticism that is very popular. So in this,
Formalism.
yeah, formalism that is very popular. In this school of criticism comes the school of imagery analysis, imagist analysis, archetypal criticism. So all
So
form
does narratology also come under this?
is again under form. It comes under formalist school. But then if you focus on content, okay, only content, if you focus only on content, like A.C. Bradley did while he was reading Shakespeare's plays, he focused primarily on content. Like De Quincey did, or romantic critics did on Shakespeare. They focused mainly on content. They did not take the form into account. So if you take content into account, separating the content from the form, so you can write a lot. Say Wordsworth's poem, if you are analyzing, my heart clips up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So you can write millions of pages on this. Okay, focusing on the content. If you are focusing on the content, you write new literature. Formal critics, on the other hand, say that if you try to paraphrase the poem, if you try to expand the poem in order to understand the poem, one thing will be lost. What will be lost? The form will be lost. And once the form is lost, the poem is lost. So I am referring to Cleanth Brooks. Cleanth Brooks, in his famous work, once stated that once form is lost, poetry is a form. Once form is lost, everything is lost. This is an opinion given by Cleanth Brooks. So I repeat. So if you paraphrase a poem according to Cleanth Brooks, the poem is lost. So let us try. Anyone just recite lines, if you remember, of any poem. Nursery poems you must be knowing. Nursery poems are all form or all content. So twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Okay, recite that. Tabassum, recite that. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
The recite.
Recite that. If I say recite that, if I say sing that, if I say read that, are these different? So select anyone.
Singing and
either
reciting.
Either read this or recite this or sing this. I give you 3 options. Any one option, use any one of these options.
So read.
Yeah, use the option.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky.
Okay, it has a form. High, sky, rhyming is there. Yes,
Yes, sir.
or no?
Yes, sir.
When you are reading, do you focus on this? So it was a prosaic reading of the lines. So
Yes.
if I just recite the lines, if I recite the line using the accentual pattern, the stress pattern, the prosody, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Do you find any difference between my reading and Tabassum's reading?
Yes, sir.
What is the basic difference?
So the
All of you please
rhythm.
participate. Yes?
There's a rhythm in the flow.
Okay, there is a form, a rhythm. How would you define a rhythm? Say a musical composition. What is the difference between, say, a musical composition and just
So
noise?
there is a pause.
There are
Okay,
up and
pause.
down. There's a up and down note of notes.
Okay, are they structured? I'm asking, are they structured?
Yes,
Are
sir.
these are structured, okay. Noise is not a structured one, while
No.
music is a structured one. The sound and silence is patterned, loudness, okay, that is patterned. So we have a patterning of sound. So that was a kind of poetic reading of the poem or recitation that you call. So if I sing this song, twinkle a little star, how I wonder what you are. If I sing this song, how will you respond to this song? How will you all respond to this song? Are a little star, how I wonder what you are. So Indian reading of the song. So what is the difference between my previous recitation of the song? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. What is the difference between these two? So
There's a little music involved.
yeah, more rhythmical,
Yeah.
more formal organization is more constructed. Okay, organized. So we have a beat. A beat is there. Okay, tal that we call in Bangla. So it
Yes.
is drut. Drut tal I have used. So there is some kind of feet division and there is an equal time gap between the feet in case of musical composition. While in case of recitation, you focused on the accented and unaccented words or syllables. And there was a patterning, iambic patterning of the lines or trochaic patterning of the lines. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. What is the pattern? Iambic or trochaic?
Trochaic.
Trochaic pattern. So in poetic recitation, you find a trochaic pattern. In musical rendering, you find a rhythmic pattern, a musical pattern. And in case of prosaic reading, you find a flat reading. Okay. So there are three styles concerned. So if you focus on the form only and try commenting on the form, you become a formalist. Now come to the content analysis of the content. Once upon a time, we find children looking at the sky, and looking at the sky, they say, twinkle, twinkle, little star. And they say that the stars are so up above the sky, and they resemble like the diamonds that we find in the. Okay. So I'm focusing on content.
Yes,
The
sir.
poet has compared the diamond in the sky with, sorry, the stars in the sky with diamonds. That is a comparison made by the poet. Rhetorical device has been used. You can identify the figure of speech.
Simile.
Simile has been used. Oh, simile is based on content or form.
Content.
Content, very good. So we have another figure of speech, alliteration, twinkle, twinkle. So a repetition of the initial consonantal sound, that is based on form. So when we analyze the form, we only think about form. When we analyze the content, we only think of content. So this type of study in stylistics is called dualism. Okay, dualism. That means separation of the analysis of content from the analysis of form. Is it clear? We call this dualism, a technical term used in modern stylistics called dualism, where there is a separation between the study of form and the study of content. Modern stylistics does not support this. Okay, modern stylistics does not support this. It is another school. It has another school of study. Yeah, that is called monism. Yes, any question? If you want to ask any question, please ask. So by dualism, I mean the study of style. By dualism, I mean the study of style by separating the form from content. Okay. When you analyze the form and content separately, you get dualism. Just the opposite of this, when you analyze the form and content of any kind of linguistic expression, literature, if you analyze both these together, the form and the content, you come to the form of analysis called monism. Okay, very simple to remember. Monism, mono, single, form and content together, That study is called monism. The second is dualism, where there is a separation of the form and content. So now my question is, which one is important in stylistics, the form or the content? We have to go back to the past, the development of thought. Which one do you think is important, the form or the content, or both?
Both.
Both.
Yes, sir.
So
Both.
I think it depends on the question someone is asking. Like in case of the example you used in the cup of tea, uh, I think we are focusing both on the cup as well as the tea. But when we are asked to describe the bottle, just the bottle and not the water inside it, you ask what does the bottle look like? So we are saying that it's a blue long bottle. So we are
Yeah.
talking about the form, I guess. So
Okay, but are you not concerned about the content, means the composition, chemical composition of the bottle? Is that,
mm,
is it a plastic bottle or not? It is a plastic bottle, I suppose.
yes, sir.
So you are aware of this plastic. Okay, this word is there in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Whether this bottle is empty or full, we do not know. But when we talk
Yes,
about
sir.
cup of tea, both the P as well as cup, the form and the content both are together in that expression, cup of tea. But a
Yes.
bottle,
Sir, I think if we want to consider the form, we cannot do it without the content. We must need the content to describe about the form. So I think for that we need both, because without the content we won't be having the form.
yeah, this idea that you have stated belongs to the school of stylistics called monism. Okay, monism, where form is content, content form. Okay, it is not dualism. So the same debate was there in the Platonic time. During the time of Plato, Aristotle, the same debate was there. Which one is more important? So according to Plato, the form is temporal, comes into being, goes out of being, vanishes. The content is all. Okay, the spirit is more important than the body. The matter is less important than the soul. So this was the famous Platonic dualism. So he gave more importance to the content than the form, because he regarded that whatever comes into being goes out of being, like Pythagoras. Whatever is born as a form will go away. That form will change, while the content remains same. So he gave the example of the famous, say, the table. So a table that is taken out from a log of wood has a form, has also a content, the use of the table. He said the table created by the carpenter is a table that we can use, because the table has both the form and content, and it comes closest to the idea of table or idea of a furniture that we can use. A painter who is drawing the form does not have the content inside. Means a painter's table, we can see the form, we can appreciate. Say a photographer has taken the photo of a table, we can see the exact table, but on that table we cannot sit, we cannot use the table for our work. That table is therefore an illusion. So the same form is there, but as because the content is missing, the table is twice removed from reality. Similar is the case of poetry. Poetry, with the help of letters, words, you are representing reality. So Plato says, who knows the chariot better, a chariot maker or Homer? And comes to the conclusion that it is the chariot maker who can make a chariot on which we can sit, we can use. Therefore, the form created by the chariot maker is more real than the form of chariot created by the poet, Homer. So this was the old debate. Aristotle came, Aristotle stated that whatever the spirit is, it is only visible through the matter, through the form. So we cannot think about any content without the form. Therefore, post Aristotle, we have more importance given to the form, to the structure. See Aristotle's definition of poetry. Aristotle defined poetry into three forms. One, long narrative poem called epic. The second, short narrative poem, lyric. Third, dramatic poem subdivided into tragedy and comedy. So his classification was based on form rather than content. So look at the content, say epic, the tragedy almost have similar content, but it is a form that decides which one is tragedy, which one is comedy, which one is lyric, which one is epic. Although the substance is the same, the thing, the subject matter is the same. So I talk about Kabir Das. Kabir Das once stated that water that you find in all the wells, water content that you find in all the wells, that water is the same, although the wells are different. Okay, the wells during that time, 1500, there were wells and their wells are of different shapes and size. So he said that there are different forms of wells, but the content, the water is the same. Similarly, those who fetch water from the wells, they bring pots, and these pots are of different forms, but the content in the pot is the same. Okay, now if you ask what is a pot of water, so in that case you have to describe both the pot and the water. If you break the pot, what will happen? Will it be called pot of water? Yes, will it be called pot of water? Never, it cannot be called pot of water. So it can be called, say, it can be called by different names. It can be called water only, but you can never call it pot of water. So when you're talking about pot of water, you have to talk about the shape that the pot has, the content that the pot has. So pot of water has a form as well as content. So D.H. Lawrence, modern intellectual, talking about style and form in the case of literature, once stated that bubble blower, okay, bubble blower is a person who creates bubbles. So when you're looking at bubbles, are you going to identify the bubble blower? Are you going to talk more about the bubble blower, or you are going to talk about the bubble?
Only the bubble.
Bubble.
Yeah, when you are describing a bubble, you will be talking about the bubble. And what is a bubble? Is bubble a form or a content? So is
It's a
it
form.
Yeah, bubble is a form.
Form.
Yeah, say a balloon. Is balloon a form or a content?
Form.
Yeah.
Form with content.
When you are thinking of a balloon, are you thinking of a balloon that is blown or inflated, deflated?
Blown.
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 When you think of a blown balloon, okay, that is round, that contains air. So you are defining balloon in terms of the content. Okay. Once the air is out, inflated, deflated balloon. So when you are thinking about a balloon, you are thinking in terms of form and content. A bubble is like that. Bubble has a filament, but if you take out the air inside, so bubble will simply break. So once you take both the form and content together, you talk about monism. New criticism that developed in America also talked about taking into account both form and content, but gave more emphasis to the form. Cleanbrook says if you break the form, content does not remain. Okay. Do you agree with this? If you break the form, if you change the form, does the content remain the same?
No, sir.
So that is what they are saying. In stylistics, therefore, we have to analyze form in order to understand the content. Similarly, we have to analyze the content in order to understand the form. So this type of analysis is called monism. And therefore, monism includes scientific analysis of the form and an in-depth reading of the content. Both are combined together. This is called stylistics. It contains the traditional forms of analysis of text that has come to us. The study of rhetoric, the study of prosody. In case of prosody, just recall, prosody depends on syllables. What are syllables? Syllables are minimal, indivisible unit of sound that can be uttered with a single stream of breath. Every syllable should have one vowel sound. You all agree with this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, every syllable should have a vowel sound. A word like water has two syllables, wa and ta. Okay. In case of this word water used as a noun, how is it pronounced? It is pronounced as water. Okay. When the same word is used as a verb, it is pronounced as water. Okay, both are prescribed. We cannot change this. I am watering the garden. Okay, I am watering the garden. Give me a glass of water. So first syllable in case of noun, the second syllable in case of a verb. So the syllables are there. In case of prosody, we analyze which syllable is accented, which syllable is not accented. English language has a particular rhythm, that is isochronic. Time is equal between two stressed syllables. Okay. So when we articulate, when we use English language, connected speech, usually between two accented syllables, there is equal time gap. This is because we have to use our stream of breath in order to produce the sounds. And English language requires a patterning of stressed and unstressed syllable. Usually the main pattern that is used in English language is iambic pattern. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. What is the pattern? Iambic pattern.
Iambic.
Iambic pattern. On the other hand, when things are supernatural, okay, something that is unusual, the rhythmic pattern that is used is trochaic. Fear is foul and foul is fear. Hover through the fog and fill the air. So the pattern has changed because the lines are spoken by
Trochaic.
yeah, the lines are spoken by the witches, supernatural witches. Supernatural witches in Macbeth.
Macbeth.
Okay, natural prose rhythm is of course iambic with a few exceptions. When Macbeth will be saying that is this the dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand, come let me clasp thee. He is speaking in iambic rhythm, equal time gap between the stressed syllable. But when the same man is in a distressed condition, he might use a bit of trochaic, a bit of iambic, a mix of iambic and trochaic. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace. So this can be alteration. So if you just focus on the form without focusing on the content, if you focus only on content without focusing on the form, your analysis of style will go missing. Okay, it will become wrong type of understanding. So modern stylistics talks about the appropriation of the form to the content, content to the form. While commenting on the works of Marcel Proust, James Joyce once stated, I quote from James Joyce, here form is content, content form. Okay, this we can use in our stylistics. Because in stylistics, we must look at the form with reference to the content. Similarly, we have to analyze the content with reference to the form. I.A. Richards, early 20th century, was trying to analyze this relationship between form and content. So he started the school of practical criticism. Okay, practical criticism is a school of English literary criticism that talks about the analysis of literature with the help of certain devices, as if an experiment is being conducted for inference, for results. So this is almost like the practicals that the scientists conduct, experimental, for inferential results. So first, I.A. Richards said that don't think about the writer. Okay, when you are analyzing a text, separate the writer from the text and look at the text, because everything is in the text. There is nothing outside the text. So if you analyze the text properly and if you analyze the form as well as content properly of a text with the help of practical criticism, you can probably come to an understanding of the text. So we have so many great poems. For example, Kubla Khan. Kubla Khan, Coleridge's Kubla Khan is perhaps the most critiqued poem. So many good, excellent writers have written excellent essays on Kubla Khan, analyzing both the form and the content of Kubla Khan. So I remember a famous comment by a learned critic that by now we know almost everything about Kubla Khan except what the poem is about. I
Yes.
repeat, we know almost everything about Kubla Khan except what the poem is about. So what is the critic talking about? Did we fail to understand what is there in Kubla Khan? Did we fail to understand the form of Kubla Khan or the content of Kubla Khan? Or we fail to relate the form and the content of Kubla Khan? So we cannot give answer, but certainly Kubla Khan cannot be read if we are not conscious about the form. Kubla Khan cannot be read or understood if we cannot recognize the content. Okay, the recognition of the content, understanding of the content depends on the understanding of the form. As you know, Kubla Khan, a poem of 54 lines, has two parts. Line 1 to
Yes,
36.
sir.
1 to 36 is narrative. Okay, the main dominant meter or prosody, this is trochaic with iambic. From line 37 onwards, 37 to 54, we have a sudden burst, okay, burst of spontaneity. And there is a lyrical release of spontaneous emotion. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on a dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Tabora. So just these lines that talk about the spontaneity also has content that reveals the spontaneity through the clustering of sounds. I repeat the sound, I repeat the lines. I am reading the same Kubla Khan that you have read. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on a dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Tabora. So what did you hear? Did you hear a song? Yeah, did you hear a song? Did you hear the drum beat? Dum 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 dum. Did you hear some kind of sound, even if you don't understand the meaning? I remember Aurobindo Ghosh. Aurobindo Ghosh once stated that in our ancient Sanskrit mantric composition, the sound is the content sound. I repeat, in our Sanskrit mantric composition, even if you don't understand what is the meaning of that particular mantra, the sound pattern conveys the meaning. Okay, that was his comment. That means the composition, the form of the language is such of a mantra, it is composition is of such a nature that it reveals the content. You can easily understand the content just by listening. So even if you, in modern day, listen to songs, say Sia's song, okay, or Bill's song, Eilish's song, if you hear. So if you cannot understand the English that is spoken, can you understand the theme? By the clustering of the sound, by the music, by the lyricism. Yes, can you understand the content?
Yes, sir.
Yes, how is that possible? How is that possible?
We can have that feel.
You can have the feel, okay.
Because of the usage of that instruments and the background music that have been used in that, we can predict that what the theme is or what the song is about.
Okay, the form is abstract. Okay, the form is abstract always. Form is abstract. So you are saying that through this abstract form, you can understand the content. It is possible. It is possible.
Not completely, sir, but
Yeah,
partially we
I
can.
understand, partially. That is what Aurobindo Ghosh is saying. But partially is also important because it is conveying the sense. So I.A. Richard talks about 4 ways of looking at a text. Using the sense, I repeat the words, sense, feeling, tone, and intention. That should be analyzed through a practical criticism, practical analysis, or anatomy of the text. As if the text is there in the table and you are the scientist. You are making a scan, you are making a rhetorical analysis, you are making an analysis of the words, syllables, images, all this together, and finally you are trying to locate the sense, feeling, tone, and intention in order to understand the 4 kinds of meaning. Okay, 4 kinds of meaning. So I. Richard said that every word that is used in literature is meaningful. Okay, so in the composition, the words are meaningful, and therefore the words that are used, the language that is used has, number 1, a literal meaning, number 2, a grammatical use, number 3, it is also related to the context where it is used, and number 4, a figurative use. So I repeat, so every item of a language, linguistic item that is there in any text, by text I mean not only poetry, not only prose, but any kind of verbal text that I find. So according to I. A. Richards, in a verbal text, you have got linguistic items, and such linguistic items contain 4 kinds of meaning based on sense, based on feeling, based on tone, based on intention. Intention of the poet, the tone that is there in poetry, okay, the feeling that is there generated by the poem, and sense that is perceptible. So that was a way. Modern linguistics, when it came under the first umbrella of Russian formalism, where the central focus was on form. Shlovisky first introduced, Victor Shlogovsky first introduced the idea of technique, art as a technique. Even before that, we have this great debate whether art is a technique or art is non-technical, natural phenomenon. Look at Wordsworth's definition. You remember Wordsworth's definition of poetry, where Wordsworth
Yes, sir.
in his definition of poetry is talking about, yes, if you remember, spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling that takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. That means poetry has 2 parts. Yeah, one is the origin. Yeah, through prolonged meditation, that thought will be generated, and after the prolonged meditation on the subject, there will be overflow, a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. And therefore, Wordsworth came to the conclusion that there is no essential difference between the language of prose and language of poetry. Wordsworth stated this, that there is no essential difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. If prose is well written, it becomes close to poetry. So his good friend Coleridge did not agree with Wordsworth's view, and Coleridge simply stated that no, there is an essential difference between the language of poetry and language of prose, because poetry is metrically composed. Could you get the idea? So according to Coleridge, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, there is an essential difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose, because poetry is metrically composed. This was the opinion of Coleridge. That means poetry has form and content. If you just remove the form, you cannot create content. And if you just focus on form, you cannot create the content. You cannot create poetry. So both content and form are essential for making of a poetry. And therefore, Coleridge says that there is an essential difference between the language of poetry and language of prose. We got the example of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Would you consider Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as a poetry? Yes, because there is a formal organization that makes this poetry. In a prose, if you start using a similar type of repetition of word, what will happen? So if in your speech, in your PowerPoint presentation, you repeat a word, what will the teacher think of you? The person will think that you do not know. Yeah, you do not know that a word cannot be repeated in prose. If a word is repeated in prose, it becomes ungrammatical. So I saw a star twinkling, twinkling in the sky. Is it grammatical?
No.
It is not grammatical in case of prose. So you have to write, I saw a star twinkling in the sky. So that is prosaic language. But a poet has a license that we call poetic license. So poet can say, twinkle, twinkle, little star, tiger, tiger, burning bright. So I asked a student, how many tigers are there? He said 2. Yes, how many tigers are there in Blake's tiger? How many tiger did you see? The poem begins with tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night.
So one tiger.
One tiger. Why the poet has seen 2? So double vision of the
So,
poet.
to identify the tiger.
So to identify the tiger, why is the poet using double tiger? Double vision of tiger.
Emphasize on the word.
Sir, he is
Just
stressing on
specify
it.
the
It is his imagination that he is stressing
Whatever
on.
you say, yes, I know you have got all of you have got answers.
The poetic license.
Yeah, whatever you say, yeah, poetic license, the emphasis, repetition, attraction, whatever you say, I say that the poet has done a mistake. Would you consider yes or no? The poet
No.
has done this mistake.
No.
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, you will say no. I will
No,
add a
sir.
word. I will add a sentence. I will say that the poet has committed a mistake consciously. Would you agree? Yeah, would you agree?
Yes, sir. A grammatical mistake, if you
Yes, sir.
consider,
Yeah.
that is
Yes.
made consciously to make it more emphatic.
Very good, excellent. So the poet has made a mistake consciously. Say, my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So where is the error committed consciously by the writer that makes this line so famous? What is the error? What is a mistake done by the poet consciously in this line? My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. Can you find a mistake, any kind of mistake in the poem, in the lines? Consciously done by the writer.
Sir, when I behold a rainbow in the sky,
Okay.
you can't
Yeah.
behold a rainbow in the sky.
You cannot see a rainbow. You have to behold a rainbow.
Oh, yes.
Why?
Sir, he has
Yeah.
jumbled the words.
No. First, I take this question. Somi has said that you cannot. Yeah. She said that behold is a large word. I
Yes.
said I contradicted you. Yes, that is an error done by the poet. You see a rainbow in the sky. My heart leaps up when I see a rainbow in the sky.
Yes.
Yeah, that might have been more appropriate. But the poet
Yes.
has done a conscious mistake by using the word behold.
Yes, sir.
Yes, the second observation that you are making. Yeah, someone. Yeah. What was that? So you said the jumbled up. Everything is jumbled up. Where is this jumbling? My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. Where is the jumbling done? I said an error has been committed, and Somi has rightly pointed out, yes, an error is committed because he could have used from the menu of words, see, look, okay, glance, watch.
Yes, sir.
All these were the probable words Wordsworth could have used, but instead he has used a word called behold, and that she finds as erroneous. Okay.
Yes.
So Nisha or Tabassum might say that no, this is a jumbling. The idea is abstract. You try to literally translate this line. Okay, Somi, try. Translate this line. Paraphrase the line. Yes?
Sir, I
Shubhavna, you can
couldn't
also
hear
try.
you.
Okay, paraphrase the line means translate the line. What is the meaning of the line? My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky.
Sir, it kind of means that when I hold a rainbow in the sky, my heart leaps up. Means my heart jumps up.
Yeah. I got the meaning very clear. So you are translating this line and then you find that there is no word. My heart throbs, heart beats. Yeah, heart.
Yes.
Yeah, what the heart does. Yeah, pumps the blood in, pumps the blood, sucks the blood in, pumps the blood out. That is the task of the. So heart beats. Okay.
Yes,
Heart
sir.
throbs. How can you make the heart leap? So a
Yes, sir.
frog leaps. Say a frog leaps. A frog can leap out. Okay. Leap means jump. So if the poet is saying that my heart leaps up, so where is it going? Is he missing a pulse, a beat of the heart? Is he describing that? My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So he's stuck
You
with
said
sublime.
that sensation.
That sensation is there. Okay, he's stuck with sublime. So fascinated by this wondrous image of the rainbow that he can only behold. He's stuck. But why does he use my heart leaps up? My heart throbs when I behold a rainbow in the sky. My heart beats when I behold a rainbow in the sky. My heart beats when I see a rainbow in the sky. Yeah. My heart misses a beat when I see a rainbow in the sky. Can these be poems, alternative poems, equivalent to Wordsworth? So poetry is something that was so well thought of, so many times, several times, but never so well expressed. That is what poetry is. Do you agree with this view? Poetry is something that was well thought of previously, but never so well expressed. Because to express poetry, you need form. Okay, content is the same. So the pots are different, the water is the same. The wells are different, the forms of the well different, but the water content is the same. So wine, old wine in new bottle. So you keep on putting it. So does the taste of the wine change? Yeah, if you are served tea in a spoon, how will it taste?
Same, sir. Same.
Same. But you
Same, sir.
you cannot have the cup of tea. So Alexander Pope is using that. Say, here doth great Anna, thus sometimes counsel take, and sometimes stay. You remember Alexander Pope's The Rape of the
Rape
Lock.
of the Lock. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Interesting line. So someone says that how is this stay rhyming with that previous? How is it coupling? So it has been pronounced like this stay. So when you take that tea with a spoon, it will never taste like tea. Okay. You understand the cup of tea, the China cup of tea is there. And this is the world of Belinda in the Hampton Court. And the description of the Hampton Court is there. Here does great Anna, thus sometimes counsel take and sometimes stay. Okay. So we have the form used. So Belinda, she is sleeping. You remember that line? So Saul through white curtains shot a timorous ray and oped the eyes that must eclipse the day. I find this line one of the best compositions as far as form is concerned, as far as content is concerned. So please, any one of you paraphrase the line. Saul, through the white curtain, shot a timorous ray and oped those eyes that must eclipse the day. Description of Belinda.
Sir, it can be stated like this that the ray of the sun peeked through the slipped through the curtains and therefore fell into the eyes of Belinda and therefore opened Belinda's eyes and woke her up from the sleep.
Yes, as Belinda opened her eyes, then
As
the entire yes.
yes, the light came from the curtain. Light passed through the curtains and it fell into the Belinda's eyes, and Belinda opened her eyes.
Yeah,
I think
that must eclipse the day.
Belinda's
Yeah,
Belinda's beauty was so overpowering that it made an eclipse.
Yes,
The sun's beauty was dulled by Belinda's. So I think that's where the eclipse part comes in.
yes. Tulagna is kind of correct, I guess.
okay. I accept all of your views. Okay, all the views I accept. So Belinda is such bright looking, beautiful. When she opens her eyes, the entire day is eclipsed. Okay, I accept that. But when you paraphrase the lines, did you get the flavor of the poem? Did you get the meaning of the poem? The poem is a mock
No, sir.
heroic poem. Okay, poem is structured as a
Yes, sir.
mock heroic poem. This is a couplet. Okay, the line is a couplet. Two lines form a couplet. That means there is a rhyming. I repeat the lines. Just focus on the lines. Saw through the white curtains, shot a timorous ray, and oped the eyes that must eclipse the day. So, why are these lines so remarkable? Is it because of the content? At the time of noon, at 12, this Belinda, lethargic lady, okay, after reading so many love letters throughout the night, chatting with her friends, okay, WhatsApping with her friends, so is sleeping. And the sun has come at 12. So at 12, what will happen? Sunlight will be direct or oblique? It is
Direct.
noon. Yeah, sun will be
Direct.
direct. If you are sleeping in a room, will the light come and fall on your eyes? Yes, it might come, but in a very oblique, light manner. So it is a reflection that you are actually finding. You are not finding the direct light. So at 12, this is happening. It's not the morning. So in the morning, if it comes, the light, ray of light, a very soft light. So it's an oblique. It's not a direct light that falls on her eyes. And what happens? It falls on her eyes and she feels irritated. Her eyes open. And once her eyes open, what happens? The day gets eclipsed. So could you catch the form that contains wit? The central device used is bathos. Bathos is a figurative device that talks about anticlimax. Now try to identify where is the anticlimax. What Tabassum or Sulogna or Swami talked about was not anticlimax. It was hyperbole. Jor se bolo, hyperbolo. So you are appreciating Belinda's beauty. She is so beautiful that once she opens her eyes, okay, her face gets bright and the entire day becomes eclipsed. So it is not hyperbole, I tell you.
The paraphrasing,
It is not.
the essence is lost. The
Yeah,
essence is lost while we are
yeah. I
paraphrasing.
accept. Once you paraphrase the poem, the essence is lost. I do accept. But I say that the central device used in this couplet is anticlimax rather than hyperbole. Yeah, how is this? Yes, Chandrima, you want to say something? How is this hyperbole that we find in the text go missing because there is an anticlimax?
So as
Bathos.
he awakes,
Yes, she has awoken. Yeah, our eyes are open. Then
yes,
I repeat the line.
the spirit of the day is lost as he awakes.
Actually, I think, sir, Pope is somehow mocking Belinda that she woke up, means she's so narcissistic and so captured by her own beauty that means actually I think Pope is somehow mocking that she thinks that she is so beautiful that after opening her eyes, the sun might feel like means the sun might feel shy and eclipse. I
Yeah,
guess.
I agree with you. Yeah, this is one view you can say about the lines that Pope is satirical, critical about Belinda waking up late.
That is, I think, a satirical view throughout the entire thing, Rape of Lock. It's not just this part.
Yeah, this
I think Pope is satirizing the entire society.
yeah, satirical device, the formal device used in this text is, I repeat again, anticlimax. Anticlimax refers to, yes, a figurative device that will elevate things and then there will be a steep fall. So where is the steep fall in this couplet?
So true.
The eclipse part, like everything was fine. The ray of sun entering the room, someone is there, eyes opening, and then there's an eclipse that the beauty is so high that it is making the day, it is turning the day into an eclipse. So
Yeah,
that is where the anticlimax is. That the entire beautiful scenario that is painted by showing how the ray of light is entering the room in between the white curtains and everything, and then there comes eyes are open and then there is an eclipse. So dulling the sun rays and the shining of the sun. So that is where the anticlimax hits, I guess, for me.
Pope has played a joke on us. Okay, Alexander Pope has actually played a joke on us. So Sol is presented as sun. Okay, Apollo, sun, who is bright looking, very charming, Prince Charming. He appears and through the white curtain he passes a arrow. Okay, आँखियों से गोली मारे, like that. Okay, Sol with his आँखियों means eyes shot a timorous ray. Okay, then what happens? It falls on the eyes of Belinda. It disturbs Belinda. Belinda opens the eyes. Okay, looks at the sun, Apollo, and then what happens? How does she eclipse the day? The day will vanish. Eclipse the day means day is vanishing. So we have the sun. Okay, Sol. So आँखियों से गोली मारे, ढिश्यों on the eyes of Belinda. And then Belinda's eyes open. And as Belinda's eyes open, this knight, Sol, vanishes.
Knight in shining armor gone back.
Yeah, जैसे अखियों का वार, जैसे शेर का शिकार. And this man vanishes. Means Apollo, the sun god, vanishes. No, where is the joke? I'm asking you, where is the joke? How can this Belinda vanish, make the sun vanish? Eclipse the day means vanishing the sun. And there is the anticlimax. This lazy girl, after reading love letters throughout the night, woke up very late, opened her eyes and saw the sun is still there. What she does? She closes her eyes. As you close your eyes, what happens? Yeah. Once you close your eyes, what happens?
It's all dark.
Yeah, it is dark.
The darkness.
Yeah, it is dark. That means the sun vanishes.
Oh,
Eclipse the day.
acha.
Eclipse the day. So this fun, this the kind of game is played with the help of a form. So again, read the lines. Sol through the white curtain shot a timorous ray and opened the eyes that must eclipse the day. Ray and day, they are rhyming. Ray and day are rhyming. So
Yes.
day is defined by the ray. The day is defined by the ray. Okay, and once that ray of light vanishes, the day vanishes. Day vanishes. My important point is that when Shakespeare is singing, when to the sessions of sweet silent thoughts, I summon up remembrance of things past. I sigh the lack of many a things I sought. With old woes new veil, my dear times waste. What is Shakespeare speaking about? Even if we don't understand the meaning of the lines, can we feel the sensation of the lines? Yeah, is it possible? There is a formal organization of the lines. Yeah, alliteration is the formal organization. He creates a sound structure. A sound structure has been created by the poet in order to create the content. So the analysis of form and content is our consideration now. So we will be mainly analyzing the form and content. And once we analyze form and content together, we say that this is monism, stylistic monism. Okay. So I now must conclude. You must be very tired. Or shall I continue?
Yes, sir. You
Sir,
can
I have
continue.
another class.
Okay, you have another class. So any question if you have to ask? So let us summarize what we have read today, what we have discussed today. Number one, modern stylistics has a school called, modern linguistics has a school called stylistics. Okay, under stylistics, there are different levels, different ways we can analyze the text. And such layers of analysis must always include the analysis of form and content. Once we analyze the form and content separately, it is called dualism. Okay, we fail to understand the meaning if we cannot relate the form with the content and content with the form. When we do so, we use monism. Monism where we analyze form and content together, taking looking at form as content, content as form. So this monism is used in modern stylistics. Stylistics has further branches, analytical areas. These include from the smallest to the largest. The smallest unit of sound of language is phoneme. Analysis of the phonological structure or structural phonetics is called phonology. The analysis of words used in any text is called morphology. The analysis of grammar is called syntactology. Analysis of meaning is called semantics. Analysis of sign symbol is called semiotics. The analysis of printed image of that text, graphology. Analysis of the discourse that takes place, called pragmatics. So we have to analyze the relationship between form and content, content and form with reference to phonological analysis, morphological analysis, syntactical analysis, semantic analysis, semiotic analysis, pragmatic analysis, along with a graphological analysis of the text. So we will conclude and try to see whether the poet has been able to use a particular style in order to convey form, convey the content. The task of a good writer is always to foreground important subject matter and bring that subject matter into prominence by using mistakes. Okay, galti se mistake, consciously done by the poet. So that galti se mistake is done by the poet in order to make us understand that this particular mistake is significant. Therefore, tiger, tiger, burning bright, water, water everywhere, Coleridge is writing. Therefore, my heart leaps up when I behold, another large word, a rainbow in the sky. Similarly, the eyes open to eclipse the day. The eyes open, the day eclipses. Means what? The eye opens and then shuts to eclipse the day. So these are done by the poet consciously. Such mistakes, galtis, are done by the poet consciously in order to foreground important, significant content. And that makes poetry interesting. The task of a poet or a writer, creative writer, is to push the word so that the word become more and more meaningful. Okay, the limitation of word is there. A scientist works with that limitation of word. Okay, a formula is there, he can not change that. So that restriction is there in case of historian. Historian cannot deviate from the content and has to be present, has to present that content in a particular specified form. Even a philosopher, while using some parables, cannot go far-fetched. But a writer, a creative artist can easily push the language and give the language a definite form, a different form, so that the work becomes more creative, more attractive, more original, and more entertaining. The task of literature is to instruct and teach, is to provide entertainment and delight. Entertainment and delight mainly is done through the organization of form and presentation of content in an innovative manner. So this creativity of the poet or the writer will be analyzed with the help of stylistics. So stylistics will become for us a very good tool for the analysis and understanding of the text. This is what we have discussed today. Thank you for your participation. Brilliant batch. So more participation I will expect. So next, when shall we meet again?